of Esquire Neighbourhood. I'm Azri Jasman, the Associate Fashion Editor of Esquire Singapore, and it's my pleasure to be hosting this panel today, Menswear Now, Fashion for 2020 and Beyond, with some of my personal favorites in the world of fashion. So 3 brilliant menswear designers that I'm certain everyone is familiar with or are growing familiar with. I'd like to welcome to this menswear panel discussion Chinese-born, London-based designer Feng Chen Wang, joining us from Shanghai. Hello.
Hi, guys.
And we have New York-based menswear designer and founder of Bode, Emily Adams Bode. Welcome.
Hi, how are you?
We're good. And then Daniel Fletcher, founder and creative director of Daniel W. Fletcher, as well as a menswear creative director of Fiorucci.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining in today, everyone. So, 4 different locations, 3 different time zones. I'm really happy that everyone managed to make it today. So, so let's kick this off with a very real issue that we've all been facing for quite a while, and has somewhat derailed our lives. And that's, of course, COVID-19. So I'm sure we've all been through some form of quarantine or lockdown. Daniel, are you currently under lockdown in London?
Yeah, we are actually. We have another 4 weeks. Luckily, my studio is just a 2-minute walk from my house, so I'm still able to go there, which is nice.
Cool, that's great. So this is a question for everyone. So how has being under lockdown or living in the midst of this global pandemic inspired you, perhaps? Maybe we'll start with Feng.
Thank you for having me. So I think after all these things happen, and it's almost, well, for me it's almost been 11 months already, because it was beginning from January, very early. So at the beginning I was in London, but actually it's happening everywhere now. So China's situation is a little bit better, I guess. So at the moment I'm still trying to work with everyone through online, offline, both together, because I also have my own team in London. So, well, I think in this special time, as a designer, we just needed to think about more and deeper, and doing fashion or working on a design connection with more responsibility, and also support each other and give everyone in the team have more confidence for future.
Right. How about you, Emily?
Yeah, so, well, we're not in lockdown currently, but I feel like the last time I did anything, in terms of like a fashion event or fashion related, I was actually with Feng in London. So it's been almost a year, right? But we're back in kind of in some semblance of a normal life. Our shop is open again. We're fulfilling orders, we're somewhat on a delivery calendar, to some extent, but I feel like it was really an interesting experience, because we began to work differently, and we almost began to work how we did when I first launched Bode, for almost 5 years ago. And it was kind of beautiful to have everyone be so malleable on my team, and have everybody, have the ability to work from home and really just, I don't know, change with how the world was changing.
Right. Because there's a period of kind of slowing down, that has that kind of perhaps enabled you to reassess the way you work, maybe Daniel?
Yeah, definitely. I think actually there were, even though it's obviously been a really horrendous time, I've kind of appreciated having this moment to take a step back and really think about what we're doing, how much we're putting out there. Actually, we've really pulled the collections back and made them smaller, which I think was the right thing to do. I think there's always this pressure to fit into the traditional fashion week schedule and calendar, and to be making these collections that are unnecessarily big. And actually, this whole situation has made me really think about how much I'm putting out there and how I want to do that. So whether that be showing on my own schedule, doing smaller collections, actually bringing everything back and producing it in the UK, from a sustainability perspective has been really good, but also just from like a kind of the level that we're at in the brand now. What we're doing makes more sense for who we are, not trying to be a huge fashion house just for the sake of it.
Right. So because, everyone's life has basically been impacted. So like the first half, I guess, of the year, people have started working from home a bit more. So, everyone's lifestyles has basically been drastically changed. Has there been a conscious shift in the way that you're designing now, so that, to kind of cater to this newer lifestyle, I would say? From maybe Emily?
Yeah, I mean, we were kind of always working a little bit off of the normal calendar anyway. But the way that we design, I mean, I think just our focus is a little bit differently. I mean, it's a little bit different in that, we were catering so much to all of our partners, and in some ways they've been extremely supportive during the pandemic, but in some ways, we've lost, some business. And so we need to be self-sufficient. And I liked what Daniel said about like moving things around and changing, who you're manufacturing with. Originally, when we were manufacturing in New York, we thought we were quite, resilient because we were down the street from some of our factories, when in actuality, it really just depended on who was staying open. Our New York factories could only really make masks and PPE at the time. So we had to move to even more India manufacturing for a moment and then shift it back. And I don't know, I think it's just like a learning experience.
Cool. How about you, Feng? Because you have, you're basically shuttling between Shanghai and London. So how was that experience like for you? Because Shanghai kind of, I guess, moved on from the pandemic a bit faster than London now, perhaps. Has that helped?
Before April, I actually still stay in London. So I decided to fly to Shanghai, but I didn't know that I couldn't go anywhere after I come here in Shanghai, But actually, things are happening. Well, Shanghai is a bit better, but also in the other side, recently, 2 days ago, they still find a new case in the airport. So it's kind of make everyone, worried again. But in the other side, like from production part or delivery window, in April, I decided to come back to Shanghai because I wanted to checking and look after the production in a better way to make sure everything is still done on time. But actually, production still been delayed a bit. We're trying to work out some more solution. For example, try to have our own e-com, like Feng Chen Wang, the com, to try to sell, D2C for our own website. So now at the moment, I start in Shanghai, but trying to have two teams in different cities, but working together closer to make sure in the international world, things still can working, but China as well.
Cool. And how about you, Daniel? You mentioned that your studio is nearby, so you could still do a lot of work, right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel really lucky now because I'm rubbish at working from home. I will get easily distracted, and I'll spend 3 hours making myself lunch and change the sheets, and we'll get to 4 p.m. and I've not done any work. So it was having the space to come to still I feel really lucky about that. I mean, the biggest challenge was manufacturing. And actually when we started to find that some of our factories in London were closing and people weren't able to go to work. One of my main concerns was that I've worked with some of these seamstresses in these factories since my graduate collection, basically, and they were going to find themselves in a situation where they were unable to work, and I was kind of concerned for them and didn't want that to happen. So what we did was we worked with them directly. So because they were having to stay home and look after their kids, but they could also like make shirts and work on things at home. So we were sending fabrics in the post and patterns and things, and we actually ended up doing a whole collection just basically during lockdown by getting these seamstresses to work from home and make it happen that way. So I felt good doing that because it meant that we were still able to continue as a business, but also I was still able to continue supporting these amazing people who I've worked with for years.
Right. So correct me if I'm wrong, but everyone here is basically independently funded, right? So how is that? Is that a good thing in this instance? Because being independently funded, you have that kind of like malleability and flexibility to kind of pivot the business should something like this happen again, or because it disrupts the normal usual workflow. Maybe Emily. Daniel, please go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I think that it really made me think about wholesale and how that works, because actually that was where stores were saying, oh, sorry, we can't take the order, and we were getting left with stock. I got to a point where I realized I don't want my whole business to be relying on these other stores. Like, I think I'm very keen to like make it more about my direct to consumer business now, because firstly, it allows me to be closer to the customer, and I think not be dictated by what the buyers want to buy. Actually, it's what I want to put out there. And I think that is more important. It's my vision, not the buyers.
Cool.
And also, anyway, just cancel their orders.
Right. And I read for Feng, there was an interview, I think in Vogue Business, where you mentioned that you're kind of working more on your e-commerce platform because of what's happening right now.
Yes, exactly. So we kind of like, as I mentioned before, we set up our own e-com channel, but also we set up another e-com channel in China, which is kind of like WeChat store. So in China, the e-coms work in very different way. So that people don't go to your own website to buy anything. So that's another story. Yeah, but this is a kind of like chance for us to try to learn more about D2C, and also we get more very good data from what our customer like, what they doesn't like, and what sells better, what price point sells better. Actually, we learn quite a lot, and then we also think it's going to be a bigger part for our future.
Right. And how about you, Emily?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I agree with both of you guys in that, direct to consumer has been extremely helpful, during this time, and the fact that we are self-funded and we haven't taken an investor. We would have had to probably adhere to a lot of, I don't know, I guess some of our wholesalers, but also adhere to making a certain sell-through and not take that pause and not do what's best for our employees or, the tailors and the seamstresses, like you said, Daniel. But I do think, being self-sufficient is, and relying just on your own brand and your own clients is really important during this time.
Right, and you've actually just opened your first physical store for Bode in New York City back in November. So, that there was like a personal milestone, and you came from a high, and then suddenly this happened. So can you kind of talk through how you were feeling during, that period?
I mean, there's definitely a point in time in which we were scared that it was all over, because we didn't have a timeline, and we still don't have a timeline on when we'll get out of this, and when we could, fully recover. But it's been all right. When we reopened, it was quite amazing, even better than the first time that we opened, and because there was more awareness around it. And like you guys, we relaunched e-com during COVID. So we worked with, our team to make some semblance of a store online. in that we created almost like a personal space. We created an environment on the website. So we were able to really capitalize on that moment and the fact that people couldn't come to our physical shop, but still wanted to feel like they were shopping Bode, in a space. So that was a really interesting experiment. And we've now realized, this is a whole sales channel that we haven't ever invested in, our time or money. And it seems counterintuitive because it's 2020 and you'd think that e-com is the first thing that you do, but for us, we really wanted to create our brand and our brand identity and create the space and the conversation around the company before we really created our own e-com.
So I guess in a way for everyone here, the pandemic has sort of forced you to kind of hasten the process of furthering the business in a way, right?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, I think it's hastened it in some way, but also just made us reassess how we're doing it and like just change our priorities, because there are some things that I was really pushing for that I've kind of now thought, you know what, we can pull back on that a bit and actually push this other area of the business. So just kind of reassessing and being adaptable. But I guess that's why the three of us are quite fortunate in being independently funded and also young, and we're adaptable actually, where our businesses are not kind of set in stone. We've not been doing this for 30 years and have very rigid rules. We're kind of just making it up as we go along and doing what is right for now. And I think that is the best approach to have, especially when we don't know what's around the corner as 2020 keeps going on.
Yeah, and I think at that point, what you said, Daniel, about like taking stock, from your wholesalers, because we're so malleable and we're able to do e-commerce ourselves or with our small teams and not make, a major production out of it, we could really almost in a way be benefited by them giving us our stock back, because we make an even better margin. And so we actually made more money during that time period because we were able to take all this stock. I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but it feels like that was a blessing in disguise, that we were able to have product that we didn't have to initially invest in, to be able to sell ourselves.
Cool.
Definitely.
So,
I was just like, actually things like Instagram, like we're able as small brands to be able to put something up on Instagram and be like, oh, we made this like small handful of pieces using last season's fabrics, like DM as if you want it or something like that. Like if you're Louis Vuitton or like a huge brand, you're not able to like do these little things. But for us, actually, that is the beauty of where we're at now. We can do things like that, and it's allows us to get closer to our customer, but also to keep going.
yeah, brilliant. So Feng, among the three, you're the most kind of, I would say, more streetwear leaning in your design aesthetic. So I feel like streetwear gets a bit of a criticism for being lazy and gimmicky at times, but with your designs, I feel there's quite a lot of craft and technique that go into them. So can you kind of briefly bring through what usually is the starting point for a Feng Chen Wang collection?
Actually, when I start my brand connection, actually it was my first connection. It was my graduated connection as well. So I didn't think about that much about what is street fashion, what is natural fashion. For me, just everything in one. Any kind of clothes make you wear and make you feel comfortable, and I think that's the very important thing to consider. And also just because some detail from sportswear will make you feel more like we say lazy style, or maybe make you feel more comfortable, and that's something what I really like. But I also really deep into very tailoring menswear detail, things about structure, things about all these everything like details for menswear, all these tailoring technique as well. So I think I quite like to mix all these things together and make them to have a new version, new style, fresh feeling I think it works out quite well. And also the other things, and I'm also incorporating with my Chinese heritage into design. So for me, it's still the same, like how I bring everything come together. But it's very hard to describe and say, is it streetwear or is it luxury fashion? I would say like, well, mixing everything, but make a new clothes, new style, like work for now and future.
Right. Yeah. And you mentioned about your Chinese heritage. And I see that it's always part of your collection. So is it a challenge every season to kind of figure out a way to put that into a collection so that it's not very obvious? Because I feel like when it comes to your designs, the Chinese heritage part is not super gimmicky. So it's there, it's in the craft and it's in the techniques. So is it a challenge every season?
I wouldn't say it will appear in my collection every season in the future, because you never know what you're gonna do in the future. That's what I thought as a creative design part. So I will give myself a more freedom space to do whatever I want to do or what I really interested to do. But Chinese heritage, everything I did so far is because all this inspiration is very connected and related to my personal life experience. For example, the one I did about the Nuisi style, because I went back to China. You know, it's a whole story about my grandmother, studied for my grandmother and how she used that technique making the clothes, and it's always you know, in my memory, even she's not in the water. But you know, this is something I can do, and I also think about that. Well, based on all these traditional technique, what I can bring in into bring to have a new life, and also to make more new generation buy all this product. I think it is a challenge through design, through production, all this handmade stuff. It's not easy to do. But for me, like, you know, I love this technique. I want to do it, and yeah, why not just do it?
And it's beautiful though. It's really done in a way that's very contemporary and not very obvious, which is great, I feel. So yeah, wonderful. So, you know, I feel like as a designer, every single work that you do, you kind of have your own inspiration towards it. So do you think that at times a fashion design could tend to be self-serving for yourself? Let's start with Daniel.
Yeah, I think that there can always be that element. I guess actually as a designer, you are, I mean, for me anyway, it's kind of like me expressing my emotions and like how I feel about the world and responding to what's going on around me a lot of the time. So I guess to some extent that could be self-serving, but then also I think it's kind of really important for if you have a platform like this and you're putting things out into the world, to use that to do something positive, and whether that be kind of talking about a political issue that is important to you, or social economic issue, or something, using this kind of outlet to do something positive.
Right, and how about you, Emily?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. We, you know, especially on the political front, we were able to use our platform to get out information about voter issues and voter registration, and convert our shop into a place to register to vote. And so in a way, you know, you're doing this to aid in your brand identity, but you're really doing this for the community and to help build the community around you, and to, you know, kind of commit to education and commit to, you know, aiding the people that shop with you, but also the people that live, you know, around yourself, to better knowledge and better resources around, you know, maybe a political issue or, you know, a community issue.
Right, and I saw on Instagram that your store kind of was a place for people to register to vote, I think, right?
Yes, yeah.
Cool, that's
Yes,
a really
that
cool
was something
initiative.
leading up to the election.
Right. So, so my follow-up question is then, so when it comes to designing, which is more important? Or which is your priority, I guess? Catering to the needs of the customer now, or proposing something new that they may not have thought of? So maybe I'll start with Feng.
Well, I always designing on the connection, not forward thinking, but current. So it's very hard to do something that people never ever see because, today is today. It's not like 100 years ago. So people literally see everything, know everything. So I would like it to stay in the middle, but I also don't want to design something like too old, too traditional, like people will get boring a bit. So I think think about, like forward thinking, but stay now. It's very important for designing connection.
Cool. Daniel?
Yeah, I think kind of the point you made about tradition is so important. Actually, I think people really respond to something that they feel a connection to, and like there being a sense of tradition or heritage there helps people to connect to it. And kind of what I always try and do in my designs is take something that feels familiar to me, and often that is British heritage. It's kind of like what I've grown up with and what I know, but seeing how I can take that to a new place. So, but there always being kind of like an element of familiarity about it, but also something unexpected.
Right, and talking about emotions, I feel like that's basically what Emily you do at Bode. It's about connection with the kind of stories that your vintage fabrics that you've sourced, the kind of stories that they tell. So for you especially, it's more about kind of reintroducing this kind of fabrics and also the old-timey techniques, I would say, right? So for your design process, so is it more about educating your customers on what the fabrics are, or is it more about kind of finding out more of, kind of creating something new out of the old?
I think they go hand in hand. I believe that it's, it's my aim to, aid in the education of the historical techniques, but also of the cultures that have shaped not just my life, but the lives of people around me, and the histories of the people around me, not just their family histories, but, their cultural and traditional histories. So I believe they go hand in hand, because not only are we putting out new products, but we're attempting to aid in the preservation of craft. So we're really working towards telling the narratives around a technique, even if the product is from, a reproduction or, a reproduction of a historical technique.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I think everyone is familiar with Daniel because of Netflix Next in Fashion. So how was that experience like, especially with reality television positioned as more of an entertainment machine than actual reality? Like, what made you decide to join it?
It's quite like a crazy decision, really, because obviously I had no idea what the show was going to be like. It could have been really terrible, could have ruined my reputation that I spent 5 years building. But I felt like it was kind of at the place I was in my brand. I was like, actually, it'd be quite fun to do something like that. I kind of approached it as like, okay, this is just something completely outside of my traditional wheelhouse. Let's do it and kind of just treat it as an experience. Overall, the impact on my brand has been really positive, because obviously there is a lot more awareness there now, and it's kind of a really different customer to who my traditional customer was, because before people were shopping me because they'd kind of seen it a lot of Fashion Week or in magazines, this kind of thing. And that is kind of a very small pool of people. But then actually, if you open it up to like a Netflix viewer and like 180 million people, or whoever, however many this was like shown to, that is a much broader consumer, and actually has meant that I have diversified my product a little bit to make some more of these like commercially accessible pieces, so that I can also kind of cater to that audience as well. But also I think it's made people who were not necessarily following fashion before discover the brand and be like, oh, actually, I really love this kind of piece from the runway, which they might not have ever encountered before.
Right. So did you kind of enter the competition with a goal in mind? Like, do you want to angle your business or your persona in a certain way?
Not really. Like, I think for me, it was more about the personal experience. I was thinking less about the brand. It was more like, okay, this could be like a really amazing opportunity for me to just go and do something completely different. And that's what it was really. It was, if I'd thought too much about the impact that it would have on the brand, I probably would have freaked out and not done it.
Yeah, and you also had to design women's wear as part of the competition, and your business was largely menswear. And I understand now that your brand is more genderless, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, no, that is right. I studied menswear. That was my degree, and I started the brand as a men's brand. And then kind of like as the years have gone on, my view of it has changed to like a shirt is a shirt, a trouser is a trouser. Like, not everything fits everyone. Not every women's garment is going to fit a woman. Not every men's garment is going to fit a man. So for me, it's just clothes actually, and they can be worn by anyone. And kind of the Netflix show really kind of pushed me to think that way, because I never knew if I was going to be doing a man or a woman, or what shape or size they were going to be. And kind of I came out of it like, actually, I'm designing fashion here rather than for a specific person. So now I design one collection, and then we shoot that on men and women and whoever looks good in it. So kind of taking out any boundaries.
Yeah, I mean, a shirt is a shirt, like you said, and I'm pretty sure like people nowadays, like I know of guys who shop at the women's department nowadays. So, it's pretty, I guess, fluid in that sense. Yeah, going back to reality television, my question to Feng and Emily, would you guys be open to joining a reality fashion design competition?
What about you? Well, I don't know. Actually, never think about that.
How about you, Emily?
I don't think so. But I guess I liked what Feng said earlier. Like, you never know what the future holds, but I don't think so. It
really takes like a specific type of person, I think, because and some people really struggled with it on the show actually, because you have to they see everything. There's no stopping it. They're listening to you while you're like in the backstage, like having your lunch, and then they'll ask you the question when you're on set. It's like, you really open yourself up. And I never imagined as a fashion designer, like walking down the street and people coming asking for a photo and stuff. It's really like not what I signed up for originally, but then I did do a reality TV show, so I should be expecting that.
And you have no control of the editing, so you will never know how it turns out until you actually see it. So that's like the scary part, I feel. Right. Back to kind of menswear and Daniel's genderless pivot towards it. So I feel like when it comes to menswear, the suit is like an intrinsically menswear invention, and it's been around for centuries, right? So, but there's also the talk of how the suit is dead, basically. So, but yet menswear designers still seem to want to hold on to it. So my question to you is the suit truly dead? Maybe Emily.
Yeah, I don't think the suit is dead. I mean, we just did a custom suit fitting last week, so I don't know. I feel like we're still selling tailored wear quite a bit. I think that some people, of course, are working from home and some people are not. And I think it just depends, especially regionally, where you are and what's going on in your current city and what's going on, in your world. But I don't believe it's dead. I don't think it would ever be totally, abandoned at all.
Like for Feng, even for you, I feel like you do have a lot of tailoring elements in your design. So I guess how do you approach tailoring and to make it a bit more modern and contemporary?
I think that's people wearing a traditional tailoring piece, like a traditional suits, because you all can buy it from the vintage store, maybe, you know, a lot in London. But that's people dress that. But I still design a lot of tailoring piece because, but in a very modern way. So sometimes like add a little bit sporty detail, or, you know, make it more like looks younger, like young people would like to buy it and wear it, and make it tailoring, not just wear, you know, the usage about wearing that. Sometimes, you know, you even can wear it to go to somewhere more casual, not needed to join a formal meeting or formal events. I think the lifestyle and the lifestyle is changing, and the young generations prefer also changing. So tailoring, yeah, tailoring will never dead, but just design out a new way. That's what I thought.
And how about you, Daniel? Because you come from a very traditional menswear background, and then you're also the menswear artistic creative director for Fiorucci right now. So how do you kind of balance that contemporary and so that it's not so forward, I would say?
Yeah, I mean, actually, a point that Emily made talking about kind of people working from home. I don't see a suit as something for work. I see it more as like if you want to dress up, like if you want to be smarter, and like that's, so a lot of it is kind of like event dressing, which obviously in the current situation, it's not happening so much. But then I feel like when you buy a suit, you buy it for, like, it's something that will hang in your wardrobe for 20 years and then you give it to one of your children. It's not something that, like, you buy a new one every time you go to a party. Like, for me, a suit is like a long lasting garment. And I mean, as most of our wardrobe should be, actually. So for that reason, I don't think it will ever die, because people are always going to want to have suits in their wardrobe, I feel like. Obviously, you're going to, if you think about what you might buy in a year, you might buy a handful of t-shirts, a pair of jeans, a handful of shirts, maybe one suit, one coat, something like that. And that's just, I feel like that won't ever change that much. I think having a strong suit in your wardrobe is an important part of it, for me anyway.
Yeah, it's true though. Like, even for me, I feel like a suit is like the highest level of dress up a guy could go for, you know? Like, for a guy, like, if you want to dress up and if you want to feel slightly a bit more powerful, I guess, in a sense, a suit is the way to go. And who wears the best suits if not for Harry Styles, which is a huge fan of Bode. And everyone who's a huge fan of Harry Styles is familiar with Bode for sure. He wears it quite a lot, actually, on appearances and in his music videos. So my question to you, Emily, is, has that helped to kind of accelerate your growth faster than you would have projected?
Oh gosh, that's such an interesting question. I don't know. It's hard, you know, it's hard to equate things, you know, with a celebrity and, you know, how, but I of course, I mean, the awareness aspect for sure. I'd say for all of our loyal customers, you know, especially Harry, when you have someone who really embodies the brand, they're the best representation of it, right? So because he, you know, believes in craft, and he has this really, you know, beautiful way of living, and he's quite whimsical, and he has a wonderful personality. So the way that he wears the brand, you know, he's our ideal customer, right? So, but I think, you know, along those lines, any of our loyal customers, you know, can help push the trajectory of our brand forward in a way that, you know, we could never do ourselves. You rely so much on your clients, and so much of what the brand is, you know, it's not what you say it is, it's how the public perceives it as. So it's a really interesting, you know, experience to have, you know, all these eyes on your brand that are coming through just one person, or, you know, a group of people, or a celebrity or something.
Right. I also read in an interview that you weren't really keen on designing women's wear, and that's why you went into menswear, because as a woman, you're not interested in dressing or creating clothes for yourself. Is that true?
Yeah, I think it was just less challenging, you know, in college. If I wanted to make something for myself, I wasn't necessarily designing something for myself. It was more this act of making something. But as you know, as we go on through the years, the brand, we see that, you know, over half of our customers are women. So there's definitely, you know, a need for that in our company, but it's not as intriguing as a design process for me because of the way that I work. I work inspired by others and the person outside of myself. So so much of my process has to do with someone else and this other person. So if it were, yeah, and usually, you know, it's men. So I don't know. It's an interesting thought.
But it's interesting as well, for you and Feng, women in creating menswear, because to me, like, women's wear has such a vast there's basically no limits with women's wear, right? You can basically do anything, but with menswear, there's sort of like at least with traditional menswear, there's sort of a fine line, I would say. And the idea that you've chosen to be in menswear, where there are certain boxes that you sort of have to fit or work within, I think that's pretty interesting. So is there a conscious decision to want to push the boundaries of menswear with both of your respective brands? Maybe Emily, you can start.
Yeah, I think for me, it has to do with this idea of masculinity and what it meant before I had a brand and what it meant after, you know, a few years in, and how I reflect so much on the feminine handcraft, you know, female makers and historical techniques that are done primarily by women. And so yeah, we're coming at it from like a little bit of a different angle. And so I'm, you know, being a woman myself, I feel like I'm looking more at those female-centric techniques.
Right. And how about you, Feng?
Yes, I studied in the college and studied everything about menswear. The first point, and I think the starting point is more about I really love menswear because it seems very simple, very nice, but actually, when you go deeper, you can see a lot more functional detail that maybe you never see through picture. So that's something what I understand about menswear, more functional part and lots not interesting detail. And but because yeah, I'm female, so actually things come from inside. So actually at the end, I turn out to design something quite unisex.
Mm-hmm.
And we found out and we have 35% of women's customer, which make me very exciting because at the beginning I only think about, well, I design things for men, but actually a lot of girls quite like it. And I also wear my own collection quite often. So I can feel something between that. Something like Daniel, like we design clothes, but we didn't put a box into that about who should wear that or who shouldn't wear that. So I think it's quite freedom at nowadays and future.
Would you say that men nowadays are a bit more open to kind of explore beyond the boundaries of what traditional menswear is?
Yeah, I think so. But I also like women as well, like a lot of women pick up menswear and things are changing.
That's true, yeah. So you've all mentioned just now that there are certain political or social causes that you're vocal about, whether it's Black Lives Matter, and I know that everyone here kind of posted something about Black Lives Matter on Instagram. So do you think it's important to be involved with the kind of platform that you have? Maybe Daniel?
Yeah, definitely. I think if you have a platform, then you should be using it to do something positive. That's my belief. I'm not going to push that on anyone else, but I think whilst I have this platform, then I will do it to kind of inspire positive change. Because if we're not moving forward and we're not making changes, then what's the point, really? So yeah, but it's not always a conscious decision. It's just like, I'm not thinking, oh, I need to be involved in this, I need to be involved in this. It's just like, if I feel it, then I want to talk about it.
Right. There's also, I feel like there's also a mounting pressure nowadays. I think people kind of expect you to say something about it, especially when you already have a platform. Do you feel that, Feng?
I think, well, like the world come together as one world, especially on this Instagram or internet make us feel more closer. And nowadays we all traveling all around the world. I got lots of friends from all different countries, and have all different skin color. So I think it's just like about supporting people around us, supporting friends you have, supporting even someone you don't know, you never meet it, but it's always like supporting. And through all this social media, I think we are not just a designer. Sometimes we post something, we also influence more people to think about more, especially, I mean, like in China, we have lots of people in China, but it doesn't, it's a little bit different when I stay in UK. Like in UK, you can see a lot of people from everywhere, multicultural in one country, one city. But by time, like people going to move to one city, I mean, it's world going to be closer day by day. So it's something like whatever we can do, we're gonna do, supporting.
Yeah, that's true. And I think it's very evident from the recent US elections, where basically the entire world was waiting for the answer and waiting for the decision. And congrats, Emily, I would say, for the result of the election. Yes, so coming from that and being kind of like having such huge platforms, right? So what does it mean to be a fashion designer in this day and age? Maybe Emily, do you want to start with this?
Oh gosh, what does it mean? I'd say, we have to dedicate ourselves to, aiding in the future and the, changing for the better and to a more equal world and a more thoughtful world. So for us, or for myself, it means, looking throughout our entire supply chain, looking at all of our processes and procedures and how we can make not just our company better and our employees have better lives, but for the community around us and, as a greater world, as Feng was saying.
And how about you, Daniel?
Yeah, I think what Emily said is kind of really hit the nail on the head. I think for me, it's responding to what is going on in the world around you and kind of pushing things forward.
Right, great. And Feng?
Yeah, I think both Emily and Daniel answer very cool way. Yeah, I think definitely like needed to be more open-minded, because you don't know, fashion season going to be changed, designer as a designer position going to be changed, creative director position, job description going to change in the future. I think it just needed to be more open-minded and brave enough to, for future.
Yeah, having said that, I feel like nowadays there's a lot of opportunities for, young aspiring designers to make it, or even, have their start in fashion. So you've all taken part in various industry competitions. All of you are finalists for the LVMH Prize, and the International Wilmot Prize, of which, Emily, you won the 2020 edition. Congratulations. So how has being part of these competitions help in, kind of shaping you as a designer? Maybe Daniel.
I think first of all, like the financial support that you receive from those competitions is really important for a lot of people when they're starting their brand, because in the first couple of years, you're really just like figuring it out. I mean, I didn't necessarily go into this with a business plan. It was more like me creating collections and coming out of university and just like rolling on with it. But actually also having those platforms like the LVMH Prize and the Walmart Prize allow you to kind of take stock of things a little bit. Like you are judged for the first time outside of like doing a runway show, and kind of, I think they're really important for just also for spotlighting emerging talent as well, because I think those are huge platforms. Like I think if you are on the list for the LVMH Prize, people really take your brand seriously, and in those, especially in those first couple of years as a designer, as a brand, having something like that gives you some real kudos.
Right. For you, Feng, you were kind of, you started your brand straight after graduating. So how is it to kind of be, in a way, validated by joining competitions?
Well, it's more like about build up a brand awareness. If next graduates start their own brand, if they didn't join any competition, it's very hard to stand out. But most of people for industry will first, so they will look at someone from competition list first. I think it's only a way to help you start up maybe as a young designer, but for a longer term running your own company and your own brand, it's another story. So, well, it needed you to learn more and lots of challenge after. I think a finance part for the award is one very important support, and also to have all these, let's say, if they can be your mentor, will be another very helpful relationship. But after that, everything needed to start, I don't know, like another level. Well, challenge always.
And for you, Emily, how did that help after your win?
Gosh, yeah, I think awareness, but also, like you guys both said, the connections that you make while you're there, and not just from the judging perspective and not just the mentors, but also the other designers that you meet. And when I was able to hear Feng talk about her business and what she's working on, and the kinds of manufacturing processes that she uses versus myself, or you learn so much through the other designers and what's important to them and how they became successful, and how there's so many different ways of having a successful menswear or fashion business today.
So yeah, you've all been in this industry or with your brand and your business for roughly around the same time. So what's one advice that you've received that you wish you've heard earlier on in your career?
I mean, if the pandemic showed us anything, it's nothing is the end of the world, right? We're quite resilient humans. We went through this insane tragedy this year, and if someone had told me that my business was going to be shut down for 5 months, I never would have thought that we could have made it, right? So I think it's the advice that nothing's the end of the world.
And how about you, Daniel?
I think to approach things with ambition but not expectation. So kind of take every opportunity that is thrown at you, but don't always expect that they're all going to work out. But if you are ambitious and you work hard, then hopefully some of them will.
Right, and Feng?
Like, always focus on what you want to do and what you love to do, and believe in yourself, even sometimes unless you face a not difficult situation, but keep doing, and one day you will be successful.
On that note, as much as I love this conversation, I think, yeah, thank you so much from Emily and Daniel for taking the time to be part of this and, you know, sharing your brilliant insights. It's been a real pleasure and a personal honor for me. And I'm sure our viewers have got lots of takeaways from this. And of course, for our viewers, thank you for tuning in. There is more to see and discover at Esquire Neighbourhood, so do check back in for more. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.